Hi, my name's Graeme Daniels. I am a therapist from Walnut Creek, California. I practice in Walnut Creek and also in nearby Concord, California. I've been doing so for close to 20 years as a therapist. And I've also worked in drug rehab settings. In fact, the reason for this video is I'm going to be talking a little bit about drug rehab as a business, and I've written a book on the subject. This is Look at the book. It's called Working Through Rehab. You can barely make out. That says An Inside Look at Adolescent Drug Treatment by Graeme Daniels. Kind of a mysterious cover, if you can make out. That's a guy working at a computer, a kid with a baseball cap on backwards, a kind of heavy-handed counselor in the background looking over, and some guy in front with his thumb raised. If you read the book, you'll get to learn what all that's about. I worked 15 years in this business, don't work in it anymore. Work in private practice now, but worked a lot in hospital settings, and got a lot to say about it, because it's a business that strikes me as a little bit troubled. And others have written books on this subject. Probably the one that two that I like the most are a book called Hooked by a guy called Lonnie Shavelson, written about 15 years ago now. And another book is by Drew Pinsky, the famous Loveline participant, whatever he is. His book is called Cracked. Anyway, my book, which is self-published, is on the market, available through CreateSpace, which is a division of Amazon, but you also can get free chapters on my website, which is called www.selfinaddiction.com. So what's my book about? Well, as I said, I worked for 15 years in this business. I was a counselor, clinical supervisor, ran an outpatient program, ran a group home for 3 years, teenage boys, so worked mostly with adolescents in residential settings, and a lot of platitudes, kind of glib kind of stuff is said about drug treatment. But one of the biggest problems that people have is that they go into drug rehabs, sometimes for short-term stays for 28, 35 days, something like that. Sometimes kids, especially, are in it for much longer, especially in those programs that dovetail hospital-based programs and group homes that can be up in these programs for upwards of a year. I worked in one program that was such a model, and the kids were in it for upwards of a year. But a lot of people that go into rehabs, and about 2 million of them go into rehabs every year, they go in and out over a lifetime. They'll have multiple episodes because the individual episodes of treatment don't work, basically. And that may be a little unfair, but as somebody who worked on the front lines for about 15 years, I feel I'm as qualified as anyone to say what I'm saying about it. And that's what my book is about. Problems related to sort of mixed opinions on how to address problem behaviors in programs. Different styles of psychotherapy are at odds. Different philosophies with how to approach drug users, from abstinence model to harm reduction, dilutes focus for a lot of programs. So-called behavior modification programs, which are based upon the therapeutic community concept, which has been around for about 50 years, long enough to be studied, at least superficially, versus so-called strength-based recovery programs, which take their lead rather more from programs aimed at schools. And so the big question mark as to whether or not what applies in schools can apply to settings like a drug rehab. Problems with how formats of therapy are applied, particularly group therapy. Group therapy, as an industry standard, is meant to be something that is done with about 8 or 9 people, facilitated by a mental health professional, a therapist like myself, or a psychologist, somebody clinically trained. But in many programs across the nation, Group therapy is misused. And I once heard Irvin Yalom, who wrote more or less the Bible of group therapy texts um, many years ago, cited that he felt like the application of group therapy in hospital settings in this country, in the United States, trod a line just this side of malpractice. After many years working in the business, I'm inclined to agree with them. Many group programs are well overstuffed, and the attention given to individuals is largely superficial, and it's a real shame. The application of other formats of therapy, individual and family, are largely shortchanged, particularly individual therapy, perhaps not so much family. And a lot of this has to do with the emphasis upon short-term, brief models of treatment that attempt to attend to a kind of medicalized notion of addiction, which on one level is fair enough, but it really doesn't provide an in-depth approach. Essentially, what I'm saying, and what I think many would say in the industry, is a person's addiction, a person's afflictions, attachment difficulties, relational difficulties are not strictly of a medicalized nature. So that it's not simply a matter of reducing symptoms, as many outcome research tends to imply. There is a place in rehab for an in-depth approach, based upon object relations theory, an in-depth approach based upon traditional psychodynamic models, which have been around for many, many years, of course, and contrary to the opinion of many in the industry, are indeed evidence-based. That's a term that is more or less a buzzword within the industry. There's a place, of course, for 12-step recovery, though some quibble at its efficacy with teens. I think it's a matter of translating its principles for teens, as well as anyone who's not accustomed to its language, whether it's deemed to be that of religious dogma or plainly spiritual. I think it is quite readily applicable across the board. But some of the biggest problems confronting providers in the field of drug treatment have to do with the structure of their jobs. My book, Working Through Rehab, is sort of 1/3 aimed at parents, 1/3 aimed at any consumers, all manner of consumers of drug treatment, which could include the kids, themselves in adolescent care. But it's also aimed at those who are likely to work in a drug rehab setting. Those who generally do are the newest to the profession of psychotherapy, and they are registered interns, and they are trainees, and people who are of lesser experience, and they really are misused in a lot of ways. They don't make a lot of money, and also one of the reasons they're unable to give their patients individualized focus is they spend much of their time providing rote documentation that is to be scrutinized by non-clinical technocrats, essentially. In addition to that, the industry is subject to a lot of oversight from public bodies, community care licensing, among other agencies, public health departments, and so on. And not to take this too much into a political realm, but it's sort of a problem of any industry that is subject to too much regulation. It sort of begs the question: who are the regulators, and what are their qualifications to provide the oversight that they are promising? And what I argue in my book is that drug treatment ought to be that which is focused individually on the afflicted and their families. Group therapy should be aimed at groups at no more than 6 individuals, or 6 to 8 individuals at any given time. Caseloads ought to be reduced so that an in-depth approach can be provided, and it is possible. These programs exist, all of which can be read about in my book. Again, I'm going to shut up hard. It's called Working Through Rehab. This cover is a depiction of, some heavy-handed methods going on, and a counselor who's spending too much time on a keyboard, looking at a computer instead of focusing on the kid to whom his back is turned. So it tells the story. And the raised thumb is of an individual. In the programs that I worked, what you were meant to do is set on a timeout device and raise a thumb, and this indicated that you had something to say in this particular program, and the meaning of the raised thumb was that of safe to speak. And a book is an expression of things to say, and I hope you give my book a chance. You can check it out again on createspace.com, which is the publishing site for it, or through my own website, which is called www.self, as in SELF, in addiction, on which there is a free chapter available on the new site. Thanks again for checking out this video. My name's Graeme Daniels.